All right, that's great. Welcome, everyone, to Tech Talks. Our focus today is the marriage of technology and sustainability, or at least the fact that we want them to get married. My name is Saida Williams, and I'm a commercial director of traffic and infrastructure at Indra. And I have the privilege of serving as moderator for this session. Actually, it's very fitting that I'm here because Indra is a tech giant with a green heart. Standard & Poor's Sustainability Yearbook consistently ranks us as #1 globally in the IT sector. So we're very interested in learning more in today's session. You're also here, and you've made the right choice since this is the only Tech Talks at this event. And we've lined up some very interesting speakers for you. Every speaker takes about 15 minutes, and then there's 5 minutes to ask questions. If there are any overflow questions, we'll leave them to the end. When you ask your questions, please speak into the microphone. There will be maybe a couple of floater microphones. If not, there's a microphone right there in the middle of the room. I think that's it for the logistics. And Joe Averkamp, Senior VP of Business Development and Sales at Neology, will kick us off today. Joe will take on a very complex and ambitious topic of saving our struggling highway trust fund, and doing so with sustainability in our sites. I think many of you already know Joe. He's served in many capacities over the years in the industry, and without further ado, it's yours.
Great. Super. Thank you, Saida. Thank you, Pat, Wanda, Cheryl, the IBTTA staff, and the meeting organizers for having me speak here today. Also, thank you to the audience for attending. Appreciate your time. I am Senior Vice President at Neology. We are a tolling and transportation technology firm. We do everything from product design and manufacture to system integration and operation and maintenance. We are headquartered in California, San Diego, California, actually. So great to be here today. Thank you for your time. This is, of course, a very difficult topic. I mean, some people did ask me, Pat was asking me, why'd you pick this topic? Was like inventing cold fusion not available? I mean, did you have something maybe a little bit easier you could have taken on? But this is a very important topic to us. We are the industry that is most likely in a position to solve this problem. So I think it's fitting for us to talk about how we can save the Federal Highway Trust Fund, which, and I'll talk a little bit about, is in big trouble. So everybody remembers Admiral Stockdale. Ross Perot was running in 1992 against Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush. He had a running mate, and Ross Perot was a very unconventional candidate. He'd say things like, it's simple, see, it's simple. You know, listen to me. And he had a running mate, nobody knew who he was. His name was James Stockdale. And at the first VP debate, his question was, who am I? Why am I here? A good question for us all to ask. Fundamentally, how I got here was I spent most of my life in the automotive industry, launching wireless systems, eventually moving on to a wireless carrier, Sprint. And I figured automotive and wireless is the perfect combination that enables us to deliver solutions in the GovTech space. So everybody should think about answering the Admiral Stockdale question. Who am I? Why am I here? This is my simplistic view. I used to be a serious engineer, but now I try to make things simple. And essentially all the systems we're working on have some form of data collection and user identification. And then we have some sort of back office and account management. And when you look at the systems out there, there's tolling, which has been extremely successful, collecting $22 billion in the US, about the same amount in Europe. And that's because we have a clear direction on what we're trying to accomplish. Collect revenue to build and sustain roads. Congestion pricing is a little bit dicier. We're not exactly sure what we're trying to achieve there. Are we trying to reduce congestion or raise revenue? New York had a clear mission to try to raise revenue to fund transit, but it's got a little bit mixed up in the political areas, so having an unclear mission makes it more difficult. And here we have, by various names, VMT, mileage-based user fees, road user charging, distance-based user fees. we're trying to figure out how to replace the gas tax. And as long as we keep that as our mission, it'll be clear. Many people are going to try to do many things with this, a particular solution, and we should try to accomplish what we can. But I think the key is to replace the gas tax because state trust funds and the federal trust fund are in trouble. I always like to talk about hard problems. The Apollo program is of particular interest, and it's been wildly successful by all accounts. But when you look at the original design documents, Joseph Shea was the Apollo program manager. In the first analysis, it would take 30 astronauts before we'd actually get 3 back alive. So who's signing up for that program? 90% mortality rate. And that might have been enough to kill the program, but this was never made public until after we were successful. In addition, you had to have launch failure rates which were half of what had ever been achieved before, and this was with untried propulsion systems. So this is a hard problem. This was something that they really had to work on to solve. I don't know that our problem is this hard, but let's talk about it. I mean, and certainly I don't think anybody's gonna face 90% mortality rates. So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the challenging. And I know that Clint Eastwood's movie is not called The Good, the Bad, and the Challenging. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly. I know that, Pat. The good is we're improving sustainability. So about 5.5% of our vehicles sold last year were electric vehicles. It'll grow to about 4.7 million by 2030, which is about 30% of new car sales and light truck sales in the US, about 17 million. So it's growing. We're going to have fewer vehicles with emissions, so no emission vehicles. Currently, they're only about 1% of the installed base. There's about 290 million cars and light trucks out there, and only 1% is EVs. So, but it's going to become a bigger problem. The real challenge is high MPG vehicles are getting better. So back in 1978, when we first started tracking this stuff a long time ago, we'd get about 18 miles per gallon. Today, we're pushing up north of 30. And this is why, for instance, in Virginia, when they passed their tax, it's not only on electric vehicles, but also on vehicles that get more than 25 miles per gallon. Because if you ignore this particular trend, you'll miss the problem, excuse me. And it's going to get bigger. I mean, this is actually good news. This is all the good news stuff. Because when you look at CAFE, corporate average fuel economy, the target for 2024 model year vehicles is 40.6 miles per gallon, growing by model year 2026 to 49. So these are dramatic improvements in technology on cars that's going to reduce gas consumption. We drive about 3.2 trillion miles a year in this country. It grows roughly at the pace of GDP growth, but this is a dramatic improvement in new vehicle sales. This doesn't directly hit the installed base, but it will, over time, be a major problem because people won't be using as much gas, won't be paying as much tax. The other good news, we are committed to moving away from internal combustion engine vehicles. California has banned the sales of new gas-powered cars by 2035. Oregon and Washington decided to join in. So the West Coast is together. They're all together. They're not going to sell internal combustion engines starting in 2035. So this is, and California has been famous for this because when they formed the California Air Resources Board, the technology didn't exist to achieve what they wanted. But their theory is, we'll pass the law, we'll create the policy, the technologists will figure it out. And that's kind of what we're doing here. And then the Biden administration has recently announced that they want to achieve policies that deliver 50% of vehicles sold in 2030 will be non-emitting vehicles. So essentially that means electric. It has to be no emission vehicles. All of this is driving us toward EVs, non-emission vehicles, which is not internal combustion engine vehicles. So some non-random numbers. 18.4 cents a gallon is what the federal gas tax is. That's what they collect at the pump everywhere. It's been that way since 1993. There's no appetite to increase it. 24 cents is the diesel tax, because that also drives this. And between those two funds, at the federal level, we collect over 40 billion. At the state level, we collect over 50 billion. And Pennsylvania leads the way, by the way, 61 cents per gallon, so go Pennsylvania. Alaska is last with about 9 cents a gallon. So this is the taxes that are at risk as we move away from electric vehicles. So in order to solve the Highway Trust Fund at the federal level, the IIJA transferred 118 million from general funds. That's from income taxes and other forms. It's no longer tied to the gas tax. We put 118 billion in the Highway Trust Fund, and that led to, it'll be solvent until the end of 2026, fiscal year 2026, which is end of September. This leads to a shortfall, though, because we'll need another infusion in 2027 to do this, and the estimate is we'll have about a 215 billion shortfall by 2031. Looked at another way, you can see it this way. Expenditures are going to outstrip revenues, again, by about 215 billion over that time frame. The other problem we're going to have is that there's trust fund contention. Social Security is also at exhaust, projected in 2033. The Medicare fund is at exhaust in 2030. They are first in line. I mean, I think they are first in line. And this is why the GAO is urging Congress and DOT to figure out a way to solve this problem in the Highway Trust Fund. I mean, we have the tools. We should be able to solve it. I don't think Social Security is going to give up its trust fund. I mean, they're going to get cash infusions to keep that alive. So what are the things we can do? Increase the gas tax. There's no appetite for that. I mean, we haven't raised it in 30 years. Fund from general revenues. There doesn't appear to be an appetite for that either, because that means we just have to hit sales tax and other income taxes. One of the more novel ideas is to add a charge per kilowatt hour at public charging stations. So it's the equivalent of the gas tax. The problem here is that 80% of the charging is at home, so you never collect the money. So you don't solve that problem. And then we come to mileage-based user fees. So some key principles we would see and have recommended to Congress are pay for miles driven on government roads. Pretty obvious ones. I know you just got to start with the ones we all can agree on. Don't pay for miles on private facilities. And this preserves the red fuel exemption. Farmers and ranchers hate gas taxes. Their fuel is not taxed today. We shouldn't charge them for road use on their ranch or their farm. And this will get you political buy-in out in the middle of the country. I think this is key for tolling and for road user charging is standard data exchange rules in order to reduce leakage. I mean, among the challenges we have is making sure you're going to have a standard data exchange state to state, and we're going to need the same thing in the mileage-based user fee. And this would be an opportunity for us to influence what's included in that standard data exchange. The federal government should receive the government funds. That has to be part of the plan. Most of the pilots today are focused on solving the state's problem, and you're going to hear more from people at the congressional level that want to solve it for the federal, and that's the problem we're trying to solve here. Privacy protections, we're going to have to solve that problem. Equity and revenue, and this is a topic that could take up the next hour. Essentially, I think what we know in this industry, because we collect money, but people pay about $250 to $300 for use of the road systems. Even if we gave away use of the facility to people that are disadvantaged, that's only $250, $300. And it doesn't necessarily target people, especially if they're using transit or if they're telecommuting. So I was just at a conference where we talked about this notion, and the concept is you should probably solve equity issues via other means, child tax credits, family tax credits, things like that. So our modest proposal here is we need to increase the IIJA funding to about 120 million. Again, we're trying to get ready for 2027. We don't have sufficient money to build large-scale pilots. We should deploy up to 6 pilots in diverse locations with this money. So we have pretty good coverage on the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington, and the Eastern Transportation Coalition, but not enough attention in the middle of the country, Missouri, Colorado, Texas. So we need to find a way to get those states engaged. They're going to solve this problem. And again, develop pilots to test at large scale in multi-state environments. We need to make sure we're checking across state lines with a federal funds capture component, and then try to be ready with recommendations to avoid another general fund transfer in 2027. Now, I'm not optimistic we can do that. We're 18 months past the passage. IIJA was passed in November of 21. We're 18 months past, and we're only 3.5 years to the end of this fiscal year. So, but we should try. We have to do ambitious things to get there. Maybe we won't get there until 2028. This basically, and this is more of a workshop slide, but it's we need information sufficient to build a toll transactions across state lines and to follow up with violators. And we need to enable toll operators to access the information for the purposes of charging users. Those are among the key facts, because similarly, we need the same rules on the mileage-based user feed side, standard data exchange of rules so that we can enforce across state lines, information sufficient to build a mileage-based transaction. So where has this worked before? Has anybody ever pulled this off? It seems like no. It seems like this is really hard. No, Pat, I'm not going to do that yet. So the one example I come to mind is the Telecommunications Act of 1996. It was the first modification of regulations since 1934, and that enabled broadband expansion. It basically cut down on competition, ensured access across state lines, it ensured greater competition. It grew the number of wireless subscribers from about 25 million in 1996 to today we have over 300 billion wireless subscribers and about 200 billion data-only devices. So this is an example where a big, ambitious program has been successful. And even in this industry, the Urban Partnership and Congestion Reduction Program of 2008 enabled us to put in place solutions for express lanes in Miami, Seattle, San Francisco, Minnesota. So things like that were an opportunity for us to test out what it is we could do. So this was not an act, this was just DOT assembling money from various sources and pooling it together and and driving success. So I think that there are ways to accomplish this. I think it's something we should discuss as an industry, because we are the ones that are best positioned to deliver on this promise, because we understand the technology, account management, users. And so I think it's important. In fact, I would recall, I started off talking about the Apollo mission. If you're, those of us, I wasn't old enough to remember this, but that's my boss laughing. He was old enough, no. But John Kennedy at Rice University, September of 1962, delivered this speech. At first I thought this was from the first inaugural, or it's only inaugural, but he talks about we chose to go to the moon and do these other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. How's that, Pat? How's that good one? Okay, thanks. And because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win. And so I think we need to bring that sort of energy to this particular endeavor. So with that, questions?